Okay, girls, thank you very much for joining us. Today we have Eilidh Barbour, who is a sports broadcaster. Eilidh, thank you very much for joining us. Could you just start off by telling the girls then how your journey started into the industry?
Yeah, I mean, it probably started long before I actually started getting a job or looking at how I would try and get that way into the industry, because I've just always been a sports fanatic, just always loved watching sport. I always knew I wanted to work in sport somehow, whether it was through sports science or physiotherapy or something like that. I just knew I wanted to be involved in it in some way. And then I remember being about 13 or 14 years old, and I was sitting watching Grandstand on a Saturday afternoon. You're probably all too young to know what Grandstand was, but it was the Saturday afternoon programme. It was on from about midday till about 6 o'clock in the evening, and it covered every single sport that was happening that day around the country. And it all came out of London. And I remember Hazel Irvine presenting it for the first time alongside Des Lynam. And I think that was the moment I realised that that was a possibility. Not only was she female, she was Scottish. You didn't hear many Scottish accents on network back then. So to hear a voice that was very similar to my own, that was the moment I thought, no, that is how I want to be involved in sports. So from that moment on, really, from 13, 14 years old, that was my aim and only aim. So I looked at how I would possibly be able to get an opportunity. There was a university course at Stirling University that was a film and media degree, but it had 2 years of audiovisual production. So I managed to get in there and sorry, there's somebody knocking on my door. I'm just going to leave him. Went to uni, did 4 years there, and at that time started trying to get work experience within the industry. So that's probably the most important part. The degree was fun, university was fun, but I think the work experience that went alongside it was the real just rubber sealed that that's exactly what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be involved in. And at that time, I had no idea in what capacity, whether it would be production, whether it would be behind a camera, in front of a camera, or what that role would look like. I just knew I wanted to be part of those sporting events and part of that industry. So sort of knocked on a lot of doors, made a lot of phone calls, eventually got an opportunity at STV to work in their sports scene, or their equivalent of sports scene, Scott Sport it was called, their highlights programme. And I was going to games, sorry.
You wanted to do
God's sake, you couldn't pick the timing, could you? Somebody delivering a parcel, I think. Apologies for that. Got an opportunity there to do their football highlights programme, going to games, logging matches, and sitting in an edit suite. And still, I loved it. I just loved it. So that was the sort of real start for me continuing that journey and continuing to work and trying to find the path that I wanted to follow in it. Because, like I said, I didn't really have an idea of how the industry worked when I was back at the very beginning. I didn't know that the huge operation that went on behind putting an event, whether it was on TV or on radio, and the huge number of opportunities that there were to be involved in different aspects of sports broadcasting, really. So I kind of fell into a lot of the different roles. I got an opportunity to try my hand at a few different ones. I eventually got a job down in London working for IMG, and I was a self-shooting, self-editing, roving reporter working on the golf, traveling all over the world, which was great. But I did filming, sound, interviewing, setting everything up, editing it, writing the script, and producing 3-minute packages to send back to London from wherever I was. And of all of the different parts of that process, the one I loved the most was the speaking to people. And I thought that's what I want to pursue. So from that moment on, I was able to forge the path that I wanted to try and follow, which I think was half the battle initially. But once I got that opportunity to sort of understand what it was that I really loved doing and where my passion lay, That was what I tried to pursue. And I've been very fortunate along the way to meet people who have helped me and opened doors for me and given me guidance and given me support. And yeah, to get to sort of where I am now, and we'll see where it continues from here on in, because that's the sort of one thing I'm always very grateful, and I'm very happy of what I've achieved so far, but there's more. You always want it to continue and want to go further. So yeah, it's never ending, but it's a lot of fun, and I'm very fortunate, and yeah, like I just love doing it.
Cool, thank you, Eilidh. I'm just going to change my view to gallery so I can see everybody. So Eilidh, as I said, we have bank questions that we ask all of our speakers before I sort of open it up to the floor, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So Lucette has got the first question.
So knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Never give up. For me, it wasn't something that I just thought would be fun, or that I just thought might be good. It was something that was a deep passion within me that I wanted to do, and a lot of setbacks along the way, a lot of I mean, there are very few opportunities, and a lot of phone conversations and emails that were saying no, a lot of replies I never even got. So yeah, just never to give up, and I'm very glad I didn't. But it's not easy at the beginning. So yeah, that would be the advice that I would just give anybody, is if you have that burning passion within you and that deep desire to try and make it happen, then don't take no for an answer at first, because there are so many different ways in, and everybody who works in this industry has a very different story to tell of how they made it to where they are in the job that they're in. So yeah, never give up would probably be my advice.
Good one. Alex, you got question 2.
So I wanted to ask a bit about imposter syndrome. So I think it's something that everybody's kind of experienced. But like when you look at somebody so established like yourself, you're like, oh, they could have never felt like that. Like, look how well she's doing now. But was that something that affected you like when you were younger? Does it still affect you? And how do you go about addressing that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it probably does affect everyone. There were times where, particularly at the beginning, and when you're trying to find your way in, and you're getting all those no's and all those no, this is no, we've nothing, then you do question it, absolutely, and you question whether you even have the skill set, or whether whether your passion is enough, whether and let's be honest, it's the industry that it is. Sometimes your face just doesn't fit in certain ways. For my whole entire kind of early part of my career, tried to get into BBC Scotland. I've barely ever got into BBC Scotland. Never. I still probably couldn't get into BBC Scotland. For some reason, BBC Scotland just were never interested in it. And that's hard when it's your national broadcaster. But it forced me to look elsewhere. I went down to BBC in Manchester and started banging on their door instead. And it's given me incredible opportunities. So when one door closes, it's important to try and find the next open door. But even still, I remember the first time I went over to do the Masters, which was incredible to walk into that studio, and I saw that seat sitting there in the studio, and I thought, nah, I can't sit in that seat. That's Hazel's seat. I can't sit in that seat. No way. And you just have to sort of had to have a little chat with myself and say, no, like, you're here for a reason, and they could have picked anybody, but that they've asked you to sit in that seat, so you have to go and do it. And you almost have to talk yourself into it at first. And yeah, I think it probably affects everyone all the time, whether it's in terms of your career or whether it's in terms of anything else. But yeah, no, I still, when something new comes up, I still sometimes walk in and say, no, I can't sit there.
Well, maybe I could just ask a part B to that question that Alex has asked, that we know that you're obviously into your football and you've done the golf, but see, when you're asked to go and do jobs, maybe like at the Olympics and things like that, how knowledgeable are you of these sports? Like, how much work do you need to do into the research before you actually take on the job?
The Winter Olympics was without a doubt the hardest thing I have ever done, because it's not natural. I can talk about football, whether it's Scottish football, Premier League football, WSL football, international football. I know it. It's, you know how to get round the questions, but downhill skiing, freestyle snowboarding, figure skating, I have no background knowledge of these things. So you rely very heavily on your experts at that time. And you do a lot of research. I mean, you research what you can research in terms of your knowledge of past Olympics, of the strength of teams or of individuals, the favourites, the underdogs, the British stories that are woven in amongst it. You can prepare all of that. But in terms of having a base knowledge of the sports, I just don't have it. And I think for me, the important thing there was not try to pretend I did. I have experts with me to tell everybody at home that, and you're almost there as the person at home. I don't understand what's happening in this race. Pretty sure 99% of the people sitting at home don't understand what's happened in that race. So I'm not going to try and pretend that I do know. I'll use my expert and I'll help the people who are watching at home, who are in exactly the same position as me, thinking, what on earth's just gone on there? Mm-hmm. And I think it's the same as well when we get, whether it's any sport, controversial rule calls. When I do the golf for the BBC, the golf on the BBC is to an audience that are not necessarily golf fans. So if there's a controversial ruling or something like that, we have to explain it. And I might know why a lot of the time when it comes to golf. I mean, I play golf and I still don't understand half the rules. So, I think people at home are the same. And it's, there is a lot of research goes in, but also heavily reliant on the experts that I have with me, because that's why they're there.
Lovely. Gemma, you've got a third question.
Just to see if you were able to recruit somebody into the industry, what would be the key criteria you would say like you definitely need?
I think if it probably depends on what area that you're trying to go into, but if it was in terms of the same role that I do, I would say passion massively, knowledge, and I think a thirst for more knowledge. I see a lot of people coming in for work experience or coming in to shadow, and they don't ask any questions, and they are a face that is there for 8 hours and then they go away and nobody remembers them. Nobody remembers they were there, and I'm not sure what they get out of it, because you need to make yourself memorable. You need to go in and you need to show that you are interested, that you're keen, that you want to learn. And if nothing else comes from that work experience, at least you've had 8 hours to gain knowledge yourself. But anybody that I've seen go in and do work experience and then get asked back, they're the people that have, and you feel like you're being annoying at the time. I'm pretty sure I did it as well. And they were probably thinking, oh my God, who's this? What's with all the questions? But you become memorable. People remember you. They say, oh, there was that person that came in and asked all those questions and wanted to do a I don't know, a trial bulletin or a trial interview or something, or record something so that they could get feedback. Those are the people that get to come back. So if somebody was coming in, either like to be mentored or to try and have a look at how the industry works, I would just say, ask as many questions as you can, try and be memorable, show your passion and show your knowledge when you're there, and always follow up, always send an email afterwards or pick up the phone and find out if you can go back in again, because you have to be a nuisance. I was an absolute nuisance at the beginning.
Thank you. Faye, you've got our fourth question. Thanks.
Yes, I do. So what would you like to see changed in your profession that would improve like career opportunities for women in the future?
I think I'd just like to see a little bit more celebration of the women that are there. There are so many women within the industry doing so many different jobs. And we see the girls who are in front of camera and who are asking questions and who are on screen or on the radio, but producers, VT operators, camera operators, every single part of production now has females working within it, and I don't think we celebrate that enough. I don't think we give enough knowledge that there are opportunities for women throughout the industry. Yeah, we can still do more. Yeah, it is not a 50-50 split, but there are huge opportunities there. And I think women still think that they can't be camera operators or work in the technical side of production. But there are women there who are doing brilliant jobs. BT Sport did a full football OB Premier League match with every single job being done by a woman for International Women's Day last year. So there aren't the same barriers that there were, but I just think we need that visibility to show that the opportunities are there, and just to educate on what kind of parts of the industry that there are. I mean, I had no idea when I went into broadcasting quite how many facets there were and opportunities there were to work, whether it be technical, production, what side of it was. So yeah, I think a little bit of visibility is important. Thank you. Jenna, you've got a final bank question.
So what would you say is the proudest achievement of your career?
I think it's probably, I think I touched on it before, it's just not giving up. It would have been very easy to walk away and to think it's not for me and I'll never get a chance and I was wasting my time and all of that sort of thing. But I stuck at it, and and that's probably the thing I'm proudest of. Didn't let those setbacks affect me. And I just kept going and kept believing that it would happen. And I just kept believing that I was right for it and it was right for me, and that I just simply had to find a way to prove it. So yeah, that's probably the thing that I'm proudest of. There are obviously events that I've worked on that have been incredible, and opportunities I've been given that have been huge and so memorable, and a great honour to present Scotland's first ever game back in a major championship is something that I will remember for the rest of my life. And nobody can take that away either, once you get an opportunity like that. But none of that would have happened if I'd just given up at the start. So yeah, probably just believing in myself and keeping going.
Eilidh, see, before I open questions up to the floor, would you be able to tell us, so you were at St Johnstone Rangers last night in Perth. Can you give the girls a wee idea of, you arrive in Perth, what happens between when you arrive and when you go on air?
It's a lot less than it used to be because of COVID. I used to have to turn up about 3.5 hours early, but not so much anymore. I turn up, I got makeup, went into the studio, rehearsed the opening of the programme, and any little bits and pieces, went through all the different promos and things that we have throughout the whole programme, and then went on air. So it's when you get there, it's sort of, most of the work happens almost before you arrive in terms of scripting, research, looking at VTs, discussing what we're going to look at, who we're going to look at, pre-match and all that kind of thing. So a lot of the work does go in the days before you arrive, and then when you arrive, it's makeup, rehearsals, on air, let's go.
Cool. Right, girls, questions, open the floor, on you go.
I'll kick it off then.
Thank you, Alex.
It's always the same. You'll find this, I'll ask about a million questions. I was laughing when you were talking about asking questions, because I am like chief of being a pest. Like, it's like my main role in life is to pester everybody. But like yourself, I want to go like down the presenting route. That would be like my ideal. So I was going to ask what the best tip or like trick that you ever got told by someone was, and like how it's helped you and who it's from.
Wow, that is interesting. I'm trying to think if I can remember. Nobody's really given me anything. Probably the one thing that is the hardest thing, and is the one thing that a few people have said to me, is just to be yourself. And it's amazing how difficult that is, to just try and be you in front of a camera, because there's so much going on and there's so much you have to try and remember. But I think as you become more relaxed at it, and one of my favorite people to watch for that reason is Mark Chapman. I think he's brilliant. He's the same on camera and off camera. Dan Walker is another one, but Mark Chapman is, I mean, it's like he's down the pub watching it with his mates. And ultimately that's kind of what I think you're not trying to bring something to someone, you're trying to involve everybody who's watching at home, I think. And for me, Chappers does that really well. You feel part of his conversation, you feel part of their build-up, and yeah, that is definitely the hardest thing, is trying to get sort of, just be yourself and get your personality and your touch on it, because I think are told to watch people and we try and learn from people, but it's important not to become somebody else. You need it to be authentic and authentically you, as well as obviously having the knowledge and everything to go alongside it. So yeah, that's probably the hardest part. And it seems like such a simple thing, but that's probably the advice. And a few people have said that to me. Hazel, Mark Chapman, Dan Walker, those that are very good at it have always said that is their advice.
Thank you. Okay, who's next?
I've got like a full list.
Yeah. Okay. Asking.
If just to jump off what you were saying there about like being authentically yourself, and you touched on it like a wee bit earlier when you spoke about accents. I have a Aberdonian accent, unfortunately, but it's something I'm super conscious of. And do you think that it's something you need to learn to have sort of like a much more neutralized accent when you're working within television, or do you think that's something that's changing within the industry?
I think it's definitely changing. I've never spoken any differently to how I speak now, so I don't think your accent is any way will hold you back. And to be honest, I think as long as you speak clearly, and then I think that accents are not something that really have the same impact that they maybe did previously. You know, I mean, obviously I'm saying when I was 14 years old, what would that have been? Over 20 years ago anyway. Well over 20 years ago. That was when we didn't hear so many different accents. But I think now, and whether it's sport or news, politics, current affairs, whatever it is, we're hearing accents now from all over. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about the accent at all.
I'm going to ask the very quick ones. Eilidh, see the experts you work with, obviously you know your football ones very well, like Chris Boyd and things like that, but have you ever had a time where you've gone to work on a sport that maybe you've not known the expert, and have you come across any that are maybe doubting your knowledge, or are a wee bit, there's a barrier between you and you sort of have to knock it down a bit?
No, not in that way, because like I said, with the Winter Olympics, I had no idea. So I didn't pretend I did. And I asked a lot of questions. If we were watching, or before we went on air, if we were watching whatever it might have been, whether it was snowboarding or whether it was skiing, if I had one of the guys with me, I would just ask loads and loads and loads of questions, because I wanted to understand the sport. But I think most know that, you know, you can't know everything. I didn't grow up playing golf. I play it now. I didn't grow up playing it. I think every single shot that every single player plays is incredible because it's such a hard game. But I'll sit with Ken Brown, or I'll sit with whoever I might be with, and I'll ask them, I'll say, right, that looked amazing. And they'll say, yeah, but this is why it wasn't, or this is why it was. And, you know, I think that's also really important. You know, you get to a certain point, but it doesn't mean that you stop learning. I cover football, but I still ask questions. I love watching games with certain pundits. I've watched a couple of times I've done a game with Roberto Martinez, and his reading of a game is incredible. It's totally different from anybody I've ever sat and watched a game of football with. And he must get so annoyed when he sees that I'm coming in, because I'm just like chat all the time, all the way through, asking him his thoughts on things. But it's fascinating. I love that different way of watching games, and you can get very different reactions. Even if you've got two players with you, or two ex-players, one was a striker, one was a defender, they read the game very differently. And I find that fascinating. I am a geek, a sports geek. So like, I love all the technical side of it and formations and the mentality behind things and how aggressive, players might go and when it's time not, all of that goes into whatever sport it is that I'm watching. So I ask a lot of questions of my pundits, whether it's Boydie and Faddy last night, watching that game. I'm a St Johnstone fan, so I feel like I know them inside out. I see Rangers nearly every week, but still I like to get their thoughts on it. So I've never had that. It's difficult. The difficulty sometimes with new pundits is trying to build a relationship very, very quickly, because I might meet them half an hour before we go on air and I don't know them. And, you're trying to kind of make it feel, like I said before, like you're engaging everybody at home in a conversation, but I've never met this person before. So that's probably the harder part of it, because it might just be people I've not met before, and some of them as well. I've watched them play when I was young, growing up, and I'm a bit like, oh look, this guy's a legend. But yeah, no, that's probably the more difficult thing than that, because I just don't think, like I said before, I'm not an expert. I've never played the game at the level they have. I've kicked the ball around for fun and, had a laugh and, sometimes had a beer at half time when we were playing. It was that kind of football I played. It wasn't what they're doing. So they know it. I'm just there to keep the conversation going.
Right, girls, next question.
I've got a quick one. That's
Yep.
cool. Obviously, you've did loads of big events throughout your career. Is there something you still want to do within your career? Obviously you did loads already, so is there something that you're still striving to do?
Oh, loads. I've never done a World Cup, men's World Cup. So fingers crossed Scotland can get the job done, and as much as it's in Qatar, it's still a World Cup, and if Scotland are there, then even better. So I've not done a World Cup. I've not done an Olympic Games. I've not done a Summer Olympics. Love to do that. I've try to think what else. There are lots of different things, and sometimes it comes down to, just little moments in history. If you're doing a game and it's the first time something has happened, it might not be something that most people would say, oh, that's amazing. For me, Scottish Cup final 2014, St Johnstone winning their first ever trophy. To work on that was, that's probably one of the best games I've ever done in Scotland. And people look at that and think, what? 2014 Scottish Cup final, St Johnstone Dundee United. Why is that the best? But those are the little things, I love it when history happens. I'm not a Celtic fan. I'm not a Rangers fan. I don't care who wins the title, but that period that Celtic won all those trebles and broke all those records, those are moments in history. And to sort of be close to that is something that is quite unique. And so anything like that, I love. But there are lots of things. I love rugby as well, and I don't get to do much rugby at all. So Six Nations and stuff like that, I'd love to work on year in, year out, but it's hard to fit everything in. That's the other problem. But I'm very lucky with what I do have to do. But there are definitely some big tournaments and some big things around the world that I would love to be part of.
Thank you. Next question.
So as being a St Johnstone fan, how do you kind of help yourself be impartial when you're on TV and broadcasting?
Well, it kind of helps that St Johnstone pretty much lose all the time. So so that does make it a little bit easier, but no, there's no, to be honest, I get so much stick off the boys in the studio. I think everybody knows I'm a St Johnstone fan, but when you turn up at games, it's work. If I turn up at McDermott Park like I did last night and get my makeup done and go into a studio and stand on that platform, it's work. If I turn up to the game with my dad and walk through the turnstile and sit on a seat in the stand, that's different. So it feels completely different. And when I'm at work, I'm watching a game of football and we're talking about it from a very kind of not sterile perspective, but it's very different, and you watch the game differently as well. I've got all the replays sitting in the studio. I've got a different view, and it doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel the same. Even, I mean, the worst one was the Scotland Czech Republic game, because everybody in that whole stadium, what was it, 10,000, 12,000 people that were in Hampden that day, wanted Scotland to win. I had a full Scottish panel with me, with Kenny McLean, Darren and Shelley, and it was, we all wanted Scotland to win, but we weren't broadcasting to a Scottish audience. We were broadcasting to a BBC audience, south of the border, Wales. So you have to have an element of impartiality and just try and view the game as you would when you're working, and try and take that hat off. That was the hardest one though, Scotland Czech Republic. Definitely the hardest one, that one.
Cool. Okay, next question. There's about 5 minutes left. Faye, you must have something. This sports is right up your street.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there was any particular event that stands out for you that you've done, your favourite one, but you kind of answered it earlier. But
well, yeah, there is that one, but no, there's been a few. I mean, Tiger winning the Masters was incredible. For him to come back and compete was incredible enough, and then he won a PGA Tour event, and that was incredible. But to win another major at Augusta, I mean, and to be there and sort of, you don't just see it or hear it. I mean, you actually feel it when you're there, and that's why I love being at these events. And that's the thing I love most about it, is that you actually because I'm watching the same thing that people are watching at home. I was in a studio, so I was watching it on telly in the same way that everyone else is watching it on telly at home, but you can feel it. And that is an atmosphere that was, I think that was unique. I don't think that will happen again. Unfortunately, I don't think Tiger will win another major. I don't know if he'll come back and play again, but that one was an incredibly, incredibly special one.
I was also going to ask, sorry, I know you sort of already answered it saying you play golf, but do you do any other sports?
I still try and kick a ball around, play a bit of fives. I play a bit of fives. I play golf and more things like walking. I've got a paddle board. I like to do a bit of, I've got a bodyboard. I like to, get out in the water and stuff. Climb mountains. Yeah, just whatever really. I do have a snowboard, but I haven't been on it for a few years. So yeah.
Nice, thanks.
Right, one more quick question.
I don't know if this is a quick one. You said quick, and I was like, oh, we'll risk it anyway. You mentioned earlier about how when you were first starting out, you were self-shooting, you're doing all the audio, you're doing everything yourself, and you're editing yourself. Obviously, that's a massive amount of work, so it probably meant sacrificing a lot of personal time. Was there ever a moment that you felt like, oh God, maybe this isn't worth it? Maybe I'm giving up too much?
No. It's a simple answer, because it's not, I've not had a weekend off really in goodness knows how long. I get very small windows to take holidays. I've missed weddings, christenings, birthdays, you name it, but again, it just comes down to the fact that what I do is it's not just a job, it's something that I love, and I think you have to have that. It's why I said you have to have that passion, you have to have that desire, because you do have to give up a lot. But it's the same with athletes. It's the same with, if you're an athlete or if you're a footballer, whatever, if you work in sport, you give up weekends and you give up time when other people are enjoying themselves. If you work in hospitality or in the arts, it's the same. It's entertainment, and entertainment happens when people are available to watch it. So when you work in one of those industries, you're always going to have to give up time. And that's why I think you need to have that passion, because honestly, a number of people say to me, oh, telly must be so glamorous. No. No. You're freezing cold, you're standing outside, you hardly ever get to eat anything. There is a lot of the side of it that a lot of people would say, oh, I'm not doing that. But I don't really see it, to be honest. it's not something that, really bothers me, because I think I have the best job in the world. So if that's got a slight downside and that I miss a few nights out, then, I'm okay with that.